Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the second day of the Escape Pod Comics Grab Bag. This is an ongoing game that I'm playing with two retailers, Partners and Son and Escape Pod Comics, where I give them a $100 budget for the month and they send me books that they think I'll really like or that they think that I should know about, that they think the audience should know about. And I give them a review, show you all the videos. And unlike in most of my reviews, I try and give a numerical 1 to 10 on these books. That's not a judgment necessarily of the book so much as it is how much I personally liked the books. Those are separate things sometimes. Sometimes there's stuff that's really good that's just not for me. So when I'm giving the numerical reviews, I'm trying to tell these retailers how happy I am to have it in my collection. That way they can get to learn my tastes a little bit better. Me and Menachem have been talking for a couple of years now through the lead up to Strange Death of Alex Raymond, all of that. So I think Menachem already knows my tastes a little bit, whereas Partners and Son were just started talking recently, so they're getting to know me. So there's two books in this. Menachem sent larger books. So this is Kent State by Durf Backdurf. Kent State, For Dead in Ohio, printed by Abrams. These second two books were both really, really good books and very happy to have them. I'm familiar with Durf's work from My Friend Dahmer. I haven't read anything else. My impression of him is he's kind of underground punk cartoonist. And so going into the book, I was a little skeptical about such a politicized event being like my impression of him as a cartoonist, I guess, was a little bit wrong. So really, really happy with this book. My only complaint about the book actually comes right at the beginning, where he starts off with "I am 10 years old" and saying, "Well, like Durf grew up in Ohio, I guess," which immediately put me in like, "Oh, this is a memoir of his time there." Which after like My Friend Dahmer, it's like, oh my god, dude, how much did you experience as a kid? uh but it seemed like the focus on Kent State, like I don't know if he was a kid at the time. I don't really care about his involvement with it, and that was true. Like, he's only in the opening sequence and then it's not in the rest of the book. So by the end of the book, I felt like he could have taken that out. I get that this is like a prologue or a preface in comics format. So that's fine. I feel like maybe a written preface. Personally, I think a written preface would have been better, because then, like, visually, I wouldn't have linked it to the rest of the story. But I get it. You do comics, you don't want to do writing, and it is a preface. So by the time I was done with the book, and like we never come back to Durf's involvement with the thing, I understand. Okay, it's a preface, but I was leery about that going in. So I was very happy that from this point on, it's just the story of what happened, and it seems like a very well researched story. Obviously, I wasn't alive in 1970, so I wasn't there for these events. I'm kind of loosely aware of them, but I found this book really, really informative book about the Kent State University shootings. There's just a couple things that I found like interesting throughout the book, that aren't necessarily involved with the book. One of the things is talking about Vietnam pushing like so many students into the universities to get student deferments, and that a lot of them, to keep their student deferment, went into graduate school. And I thought that was really interesting, because I could see how it grew the academy and led to the academic bloat, where all of those people, then a lot of them were going to need academic jobs, and so you get more and more people to maintain their jobs in academia. We need more and more students to maintain all of those faculty positions, and that continues to be a problem today. And I never linked that to the idea of people who would not normally go to grad school would enter into the job market going to grad school to stay out of Vietnam. So I found some of these incidental details about the era very interesting. All of the research in the book is very interesting, very well laid out. What I found Also really compelling is how much it feels contemporary. Like, it's very easy to think that the stuff we're going through now is like the craziest stuff ever, but you go back and you read this and it's like, wow, things were way more whipped up on campuses than they are now. Way more whipped up with the misinformation that we experience and all are worried about now. We're talking about the Weathermen in the 60s as like this radical group, and I was mentally comparing it to the Antifa stuff going on. Um, and I really like that it's an even-handed account. Like, it's not just a condemnation of the guards and the police and the authority figures. Like, it's also saying, look, there were these radical figures that were in these student groups like the Antifa whipping things up. I went to Berkeley when the Berkeley riots happened in 2017. I had a lot of friends from the Bay Area telling me about Antifa being this element that would come in and purposely stir up, an anarchist movement, purposely stir up peaceful student protests to kick off more violent things. That was from all my extremely liberal friends in the Bay Area. A couple years later, all of a sudden, Antifa is like somehow the heroes on the national stage, and I found that very strange. And so I like that he's showing, like, look, protests are dangerous because radical elements can come in and turn them violent very quick. It's a necessary societal strategy, but they're really dangerous. As soon as you get in a group, someone can weaponize that. And he's not just laying it all on the authority figures in the book. A lot of it obviously gets laid on the authority figures, but the students choose to burn the ROTC. They're running out, and the firefighters are just trying to do their job, and the students are stabbing holes in it to try and get the ROTC building to burn. There's bad actors on both sides that lead the tension to escalate. And then it does a real good job of showing the tension, like a really great job showing the tension and the fear on both sides rise. So how students who aren't even involved in the protest get caught up in it, and they're living under a police state, and it's like, holy crap, we were just at the movies and now we got these soldiers coming at us. And that takes students who weren't going to riot and radicalizes them because they're angry. They had tear gas thrown at them. Like, I would be pissed too. I would be more likely to riot. But also showing that the soldiers, a lot of these are ROTC volunteers or poorly trained people, and talking about, like, look, they're on this campus and they're outnumbered, massively outnumbered, and they've never been more scared in their life. And I really, really appreciated that even-handed approach. I think when dealing with situations like this, a nuanced, empathetic view of all sides is important. And I think going into the book, my assumption was that it wouldn't be that, just because his underground punk rock aesthetic to his cartooning and stuff pre-biased me a little bit. And I'm just used to books of this kind now these days tending to be, more one-sided, and so those are biases I have that I needed to get over. A lot of stuff about misinformation spreading through the town, like the Weathermen are going to be pouring LSD into the water, and how that can spread really quickly and continue to ramp up the tension. A really good balance between mostly dialogue and then these pages that are informative pages that tell things that would be harder to fit into dialogue. You don't ever feel like you're just slogging through a history book for pages on end. There will be just enough, and then you're back to the action. Really great cartooning. I mean, just a fantastic artist that moves the story along perfect. Once you get to the actual day of the protest, I found it very interesting that the majority of the people who did show up to the protest weren't the original protesters. These were students, it was about 500, I think, that had been whipped up over the course of the week. And they're talking about, like, hey, I only recognize like 10 people out here. Who are these other people? Or they people from outside campus? Are they plants from the government? Are they plants from revolutionary groups? And that no one who was originally involved, like the usual SDSers, the revolutionary Weathermen related people, they had like whipped it up and bounced. They knew when it was going to kick off and let other people take the hit. And I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind. Like a lesson to learn from all of this is, don't be a pawn in other people's games, ramping up the violence. You never know what purpose this is for. Another thing that I found very, very effective, from Durf's cartooning, is his explanation of the tactics that were being used, the general strategy, and then the particular tactics to employ the strategy, and how that all led to the situation going wrong as the individual groups of guards went to where they shouldn't be and got themselves blocked off. Using those information graphics really, really clearly and effectively really nailed home the story. And then I think I was going to rate this book a 9 all while I was reading it, because it's like a really, really great book that really does what it's trying to do, but it didn't, it didn't make me think about comics in a new way or push boundaries or anything like that, which is kind of what bumps things over into a 10 for me. But at the end, where he's going through the students who got killed, the 4 students who got killed, and the students who got injured, and doing his little tributes to who they were, and how many of them weren't even involved in the protest, like he lands the emotional aspect of that so strong that that bumped this book into a 10 for me. This is a 10. This is a great, even-handed account. I don't know enough to speak to how historically accurate it is, but I really appreciate that there's all of these notes in the back, so if you really do want to follow up on the information that he's giving you, you don't just have to take him at his word for it. Like, you can follow down sources and things like that. So to me, this is an exemplary example of, if you're going to do a historical account of a situation like this, especially a politicized situation, how to walk that midline and really show all sides of it, show where each side made errors, and you can still lay blame largely on one side versus another side. But I found this a really admirable approach to this subject, and masterfully handled in the cartooning, and really emotionally impactful, and honestly terrifying, because I feel like these things could happen again at any time, and that's why books like this are necessary, is to constantly remind ourselves. So strong 10 on this one. Good call, Menachem. The Dancing Plague by Gareth Brooks from Self-Made Hero. This book is the kind of book that's the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing with these grab bags. This is a book that I think if I would have just picked it up and like done this deal with it, depending on what pages I landed on, I probably wouldn't have bought it. So I'm relying on the recommendations of others to be like, hey, you need to check this out. And then, then I'm going to sit down and read it. Even if I would have just like picked up the first couple pages, I might have not looked at it even if I read the first couple pages. Up front, you get 2 definitions. One is choreomania, and the other is pyrography. Choreomania is talking about just the need to dance, the dancing madness, which is explained in the foreword as something that was, this is based on some legitimate events in 14th century medieval Europe up through the 16th century, where many people in the area would just start dancing until they died, their feet bled or whatever. So that's what the book is about, is one of these bouts of dancing madness kicks off. And pyrography is a method of making drawings or designs by means of heated implements. And I'm glad I read those, because then I can tell that most of the book is drawn by burning something, I believe. Also, there's stitchery. A lot of the images made with embroidery, and these are obviously photographs being taken of the canvas on which the embroidery is done. Now, I'm not sure if the canvas is what's being burned, or if something else was burned and then scanned and then digitally overlaid. Sometimes it looks like that. I'm not sure if there was other drawing materials or inks used. It looks like there may have been. So I'm very curious about how the images were exactly made, but I know there had to be some burning involved in a lot of them. And as soon as I glommed onto that very unique material use in this book, it was like, oh, okay, super excited about this. And like I said, I don't think I would have got that on just a flip through. Again, on a flip through, if I just seen the first couple pages, I would have thought, well, it's like, some pretty stiff, crude art. But when I'm paying attention and sitting down and reading, it's like, okay, this is happening in medieval Europe. And so it's intentionally in that style of art that you would get from medieval Europe. And a lot of the crudity that would have probably turned me off, like, there, husband, shit yourself inside out, and people throwing shit out the window. That's just the kind of humor and imagery that you would see then. So, when I'm paying attention, there we go. Okay, it makes sense. There's some really intense things, like here, mothers who had to choose which mouths to feed, and you just have this woman like dumping her baby off the side. When we're talking about looking back to the Marco Rudy book I just talked about, needing to have readers slow down, this type of very static imagery slowed me down, and I had to start making the connections between the panels a little bit more. So this book really, really engaged me visually, even though, like I said, the drawings seem crude at first. I think they're actually really quite sophisticated images. And then you can see that Gareth Brooks is really a sophisticated visual artist. It's almost like an actor who's so good that they're acting poorly. They seem like they're acting poorly. That's kind of going on in some of the drawing, because you get these scenes where the main character, Mary, is seeing the possession that's happening in the town that's leading to the dancing, at least according to her. And you get these awesome embroidered characters with these wonderful designs and wonderful use of color. You see all of the burning. It's the panel borders that make me most question that this was done on something else. The drawings look like they could be done on the canvas, but the way the panel borders work, but maybe that was just paper that was burnt and scanned and everything else was done on the canvas. I'm not sure. I'm really curious. If there's like a bound version of all the original art, like a one-off copy of this, that would, each one of these, and it's all on the canvas like that, that would be a hell of an experience to be able to feel the tactile nature. And a really amazing one-off art object that hopefully someone gets to buy. There's a really interesting challenge to Gareth Brooks as an artist, I think, because he's committed to using the very stiff nature of medieval art and the kind of the wonky perspective that's often there. When he has a scene like this that has to have more action in it, you can see him kind of pushing against, like, it starts to look a little too realistic. And you have a character engaged in something much more active than they would be, and you see him pushing up against the limits of the boundaries of the project. This is a very bounded project. Like, every decision is driven by the story. Even the decision to make the images with burning is driven by the story. So it's interesting to see that. I still think they're very successful, but it's interesting to see, like, man, how would you do that? Like, I don't know. And the moments where the embroidery comes in and the color comes in, they're just stunning. And again, you can see, what he really could be doing as an artist and where he's holding himself back. Some more, when things really kick off with the dancing and the possessions, some formal play where you really break out of the grids that you would see that speak more to the medieval types of art. So I really like that. Also, when we're talking about pushing up against boundaries, like letting yourself break outside of the boundaries for visceral impact within the thing, not keeping too strict. And then just going to some full page splashes that are all embroidery. I don't think I've ever seen this in a comic before. So one of these books that's making me rethink the medium, rethink the possibilities of the medium. I want this to be tactile so bad, but I get why you couldn't mass produce that. But God, I would love to hold the original book. So really thinking about comics as singular objects, which is a strange thing because we're so used to the mass marketing of it. But yeah, this makes me want to. I wish I had the money to buy a bound copy of all the original art. Some really well, the story. I haven't even talked about the story. The story is really good too. It follows Mary, who's a woman who has visions. She's really committed to her religious worldview and believes she gets visions from God, and has been told by God that as long as she keeps praying, no harm will come of her. All of the men in the clergy say, yeah, whatever. These aren't visions from God; they're visions from demons. And she's trying to help them solve these dancing fits because she says she can see the possessions happening. In this scene, she goes to a priest and is trying to talk to him, and he's like, okay, well, you just go pray, and I'm going to do all these things to pray for you. And so that night he's sleeping naked on cold stone as part of his prayer to help save her soul. And he basically has a dream, but in his mind he's visited by a vision of her masturbating, and it causes him to have a wet dream. And he wakes up and thinks he's had this vision, and he's like, "Oh, I've been visited by a succubus," and then he's begging for forgiveness from Christ. So just showing some of the unsettling consequences of the belief systems that they held at the time. I feel like that's a really potent scene. So that's something, and it cuts back and forth between Mary's youth and then the current situation in 1518, where you have this outbreak of the dancing plague and the resolution of that. And then at some point in the book, Mary throws herself in the fire as well to prove her godliness, and that's where you really go, oh, okay, that's why this burning, this pyrography is so important to the making of the book. So yeah, this is a 10, absolute 10. I have already gone to Gareth Brooks's website and ordered every other book that he's made, whether self-published or published by someone else. This is the type of thing that I love to find, and it's especially great when it's something I know I would have overlooked, and I beat myself up for that, and someone like Menachem, who really knows what they're talking about, says, hey dude, you're overlooking something. It's extremely well written, amazing art. The way that the art is produced is of a conceptual whole with the story. It's an impactful story that has good emotional weight, has historical weight. This is a book that was produced after COVID hit too, so I think this is the first book I've read that is really a modern attempt to deal with COVID, deal with the idea of plagues. So yeah, you couldn't get a better book than this. This is a 10 out of a 10 for sure. I think everyone should go buy this. I guarantee as soon as I get the rest of Gareth Brooks's books, I'll be doing an artist overview and showing you what else he's done, because it looks like exciting stuff. So this is an artist I would say everybody get behind.